to be able to tell you about these things. It's kind of a series of 3 lectures this fall, and they're all focusing on people, the important Buddhist masters of the earliest part of Korean Buddhism, the ones who made Korean Buddhism become really Korean. And last time we did Master Jajang. Today is really the superstars, Wonhyo and Uisang, and next time we do Dosan Guksa, who was really important at the end of the unified Shilla era. Now, first of all, I'd like to introduce 2 vocabulary words that we can use in this. 2 important words to know for Korean Buddhism. They both begin with do, the way, but Doban, the first one, Doban, D-O-B-A-N, Doban. Doban means a companion along the way, a good friend, a spiritual friend, a friend in religion who comes along together with you, walks the pathway with you. And that's really much better than just going alone. And even having a small group at, group meditation, group study, group practice. A Doban is a close friend, a friend of the heart who travels towards enlightenment together with you. And even this would apply even really for like Christians, seeking to find Jesus and to know God together, studying together, going together. But it's a particular Buddhist term. And Wonhyo and Uisang, these 2 men are our best example of Doban, a Doban relationship. They were friends all of their life, since they were teenagers until they died. They're very different kinds of people, very different personalities, but they were Doban, going together and talking all the time, discussing, helping each other to understand better and editing each other's written papers and doing it together, even though they were doing very different things. In different ways. Doban. The other is Doryang, which I have a page on my website for, actually. So we'll get these down for a moment here. And here at my website, and Doryang, got a whole page here for this. Doryang, to hear in Korean and Chinese. The residents of, say, a bodhisattva or another deity of Buddhism, the place where they live, sort of, kind of, spiritually, and there can be more than one, special places that you venerate that deity. Some particular Buddha, some particular bodhisattva, etc., a special place. Of course, you can pray to a bodhisattva or bow to a Buddha any place, and you can do it right in this hall or at any temple, any place, but then special places, where people feel that the energy of that bodhisattva or that Buddha or that Nahan or other beings are specially strong, and you can really get the spirit there, and worship at that place is especially beneficial. That's a Doryang. So we say, that temple, that's Doryang for Kwanseum Bosal, Bodhisattva of Compassion. The Sobeksan Mountains of Korea are a Doryang for the Birobul, Birochana Buddha. Jirisan is a Doban for Munsu Bosal, the Bodhisattva of wisdom. So is Odesan is also Doryang for Bodhisattva wisdom. We have 5 major Doryang for Gwanseum Bosal in Korea. Just that, and a total of 33 special shrines for him, and etc. A Doryang. So please understand those 2 vocabularies for today's talk, so that it makes fully more sense. Okay, now we go here. We're going to Wonhyo and Uisang. Again, very different kinds of people. First of all, we will tackle Mr. Mr. Wonhyo. Born in 617, these are two of the most popular modern portraits of him based on old descriptions or drawings and such of what he may have looked like and such. And really, Korea's favorite Buddhist monk. Favorite, the most popular. Other great masters, including Master Uisang and Master Jajang, Master Doban, Korean people respect them. They highly respect them. Korean people love Wonhyo, and I'll tell you why. The whole public loves him. Many people who are not Buddhists love him. I'm going to say he's really the most characteristic Korean one. This is his name in full detail. Okay, now just to review quickly the four golden ages of Korea. If you don't know this, the four times when Korea was great, prosperous, rich, powerful, a grand civilization making great artworks. These four times. The fourth one we're living in right now, at least in South Korea. North Korea, not so much. But the first one, 600 to 800, and Wonhyo, born right into that, 617. He is one of the reasons that it became the first golden age. He's one of the top 12 people who, during the 600s, made it a golden age. And such. Now, the Three Kingdoms era, that's where we are, and such. 300s to the 660s, beyond myth or whatever, three actual kingdoms going on. And this is a situation when Wonhyo was born, where that A symbol, that's where Wonhyo was born, and G is Gyeongju, the ancient capital of Shilla. Shilla was already this big. Shilla started out as just Gyeongsangbuk-do area and a bit of Gyeongsangnam-do, and eventually became all of Gyeongsang-do provinces originally, but then already in the middle to late 500s conquered this much territory, including, notice, the Seoul area was already controlled by Shilla. So a sense of a rapidly expanding kingdom getting much bigger and stronger, rapidly doing very well during all of Wonhyo's lifetime. And then he lived through the unification. Okay, 617, King Jinpyong in Amyang, which is now in Gyeongsang City. The place where he was born is now a Buddhist temple. This is a decoration from that temple back on the altar, just paintings of Wonhyo's life at this temple. They treat him as if he's a Buddha himself, and in some sense he was the living, walking, talking Buddha of 7th century Korea. Perhaps they worship him here a little too much. He was just a real human being. Now here is a birth name, if you care. Okay, he was under Queen Sunduk. He becomes a monk. Queen Sunduk, very notable in all of Korean history, the only really powerful, strong, full-fledged female monarch. Had Jinduk after her, but just for a short time and such. She really controlled the kingdom totally and with great ability. She was a great queen, ruling queen, and strengthened the Shilla kingdom and strengthened Buddhism very strongly in the Shilla kingdom. When she started, in her earlier years, Master Jajang came back from China, as I lectured here last time, and really established a full-fledged royal organized Buddhism. And Wonhyo and Uisang were the next generation after Master Jajang was like 45 years old and totally organized Korean Buddhism. They were teenagers and coming into Buddhism, benefiting from that into an organized national Buddhism under the great queen. These were good days for Shilla. And he was, now that tower was just being built in 643, 644, that era, and Wonhyo was ordained as a monk before that. So you imagine this temple without the tower. And at the bottom is what this temple looks like today. The Mongols destroyed everything, and Kyungju said he's talking about rebuilding it. That I don't know if that'll ever happen. Well, they keep talking. Okay, now from 32 to 45, until the time that tower started getting built by great master Jajang, he studied Lotus Sutra and other philosophies with these masters who were known as great masters in the beginning. Okay, but he did not get enlightenment. And his younger friend Uisang, now we're going to get to Uisang next, but Uisang is like 7 years younger than him, but they made friends while studying Buddhism together at these temples, made friends and became Doban, became brothers on the road together. And they tried to travel to Tang China. They went overland, but were arrested as spies by the Goguryeo kingdom police up there in Manchuria. And they were detained for a while, but then they were released and sent back. It's a good thing they didn't get killed. All right, but they had to go back to Kyungju, and then they decided to go by ship. Let's try it again by ship across the Yellow Sea, and that's from Dangjin. Dangjin means the port for Tang Dynasty. Tang Dynasty, China, which was just happening. Notice Wonhyo born 617, by 618, the Tang Dynasty of China started. China's most glorious period, perhaps, the period of China's greatest cultural development and even physical development. The Tang Dynasty started 618, and including a great raft of new kinds of Buddhist schools. Chinese Buddhism was finally flourishing. Buddhism came into China like 100 AD and spent 300-400 years just getting translated, and Indian Buddhism getting implanted in China. By about 500 AD, they started Chinese Buddhism, schools of Chinese Buddhism. By 600 AD, Chinese Buddhism was rolling, was rampant, escalating, great masters in great temples with whole new teachings. And so by Wonhyo's time, by the time we're getting to the 640s, China is really the place to go to get the best teachings. Great masters like Korea did not yet have. Okay, so we go to Danjin. That's Danjin right there. It's still called that today. They go out there. Now, the great story, really kind of everybody's favorite story of Korean Buddhism, completely. Wonhyo and Uisang get out there and at Dangjin, and they're looking for the ship, but then at night comes, the sun goes down, and it's raining. It starts raining hard, and so they're looking for a place to hide, a place to sleep overnight, and they're in the hills near the coast, and they find a cave. There's a cave kind of opening, and they take shelter in there. Okay, well, thank God we're dry, at least. And they think it smells funny, maybe. It kind of smells funny, but they ignore that. They don't care. They're really tired. They go down, just go to sleep. They go to sleep. At the midnight, imagine, 1 a.m. or so, Wonhyo wakes up, and he's feeling thirsty. Like you do sometimes in the middle of the night. He's thirsty. And he hears over on the side of the cave water dripping. Drip, 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 drip. There's water drip sound. And it's totally dark, but he feels his way over there in total darkness and finds water dripping, and there's a cup. There's a nice cup there catching the water. So good. And he drinks the water and puts down the cup, and then he's satisfied, and he goes back to sleep. Fine. But then in the morning, say it's 6 a.m. in the morning, the sun's coming up, it gets light in there, and Wonhyo and Uisang wake up, and then they look around, and they see skeletons. They see bones and skeletons and realize, oh my God, this is not just a cave, this is an old tomb. This is a tomb cave that people were using hundreds of years before, and so there's skeletons and the maggots on them and such. And Wonhyo looks over at the water place, and the cup that he thought the cup was a skull, the top of a human skull that he thought was a cup, and it still had some dead meat on it. And Wonhyo and Uisang, they get terrified. They run out of the cave, out of the ground, and Wonhyo vomits. Just blah on the ground like students at Hongdae Ipgu at 2 a.m. Just vomits on the ground. And Uisang says, "Oh, my brother, are you okay?" And Wonhyo stands up and bing, boom, enlightenment. He's got it. He says, "Oh my God, it's judgment. It's our judgment. It's all in our mind. The way we judge and evaluate things, and that makes our emotions and such. When I thought it was a nice cup, I was satisfied and nothing wrong. But now I see it's a skull from a dead body, and now I'm disgusted and I vomit. It's all judgment. It's all in our brain. It's just what we think." And he breaks through after years of meditation and study. Breaks through. That was his trigger to do it for real enlightenment, and he understood. He understood Buddhism. He got the truth right there. And then his friend Uisang, he says, "Hey buddy, there's the ship. The ship's coming in. Quick, get your stuff. Let's go down to the dock." And Wonhyo says, "I'm not going." And Uisang says, "What?" And Wonhyo says, "I don't need to go to China." He said, "The truth of the Buddha Dharma itself is equal. It's right here in Korea. Equal as it is in China, equal as it is in India itself. There's no reason to travel. I've got it. I understand. And I'm just going to practice right here in Korea. Don't need to go to China." Now, Uisang, he says, "Well, that's excellent. You're enlightened. Congratulations. Good. But I'm not enlightened. I'm going to China to study. Bye-bye, my friend." And Uisang goes to the ship and has many great adventures, which we'll get to later, I hope. Wonhyo stays in Korea. Now, this is sort of a thing. You can imagine Koreans these days, right now, Koreans. There's a fair amount of Koreans who study hard here, and then they go to, let's say, America. They go to MIT, they go to Stanford, Harvard, Yale, and they get the new teachings, the latest teachings, the best teachings, let's say, of technology or something, the new stuff. And then they come back to Korea and get a job with Samsung. They bring this back to Korea. They're a kind of a hero. They're doing a great thing for Korea, and people respect them. But there's been a few Koreans who never go to the foreign country. They don't go to MIT. They stay here, and just with their own genius, they create new technology. They got a new idea. They create something great. And then the public kind of loves them, you understand. There's this guy named An Chul-soo, for example. An Chul-soo couldn't even speak English, never went to the foreign country, but he developed some really good computer programs like 25 years ago, new kind of virus, antivirus security that was really good, some programs. And he got really popular, An Chul-soo, because he never left Korea. He just invented everything right here on this soil. So the public, they kind of loved him so much that then he was so popular. Some time ago, he ran for president. Yeah, that was a failure because he's not a politician. No good at that. He's a technology guy, just like Steve Jobs or something. Not going to be a politician. So he failed. But he was that much popular because he's the home soil guy, the hometown guy. And this is Wonhyo, you see the difference. A guy like Uisang who goes to China, gets the great teachings, brings it back to Korea, or An-Yang for Neo-Confucianism or certain others. That's really respectable. That's great. But people love Wonhyo when he said, "I don't need to go to China. The Buddha Dharma is right here in Korea. It's good enough." So, the great Enlightenment story there. And this is one of the most popular stories of all Korean Buddhism. And these are on my website, this whole page of pictures of Wonhyo. That's one from Japan, and sat right here in Seoul, Hyochang Park, and this is an older set of him and Uisang together as friends, and here, Wonhyo's Enlightenment, and for more of that, let's go here. You can find these paintings in so many temples of Korea. It's one of the really common temple paintings. Wonhyo with the skull, and let's go here, getting enlightened, such, and Uisang watching him. Here, Wonhyo outside of some tombs with the skull. Here, Uisang looking very concerned and brotherly as Wonhyo's kind of meditating with the skull. They got all these different themes, different ways of showing this. Here's Wonhyo waking up with the skull, and here they are drinking water from the skull in the midnight while Uisang is sleeping. You see here, and here, Wonhyo's dancing with the skull, dancing with joy, enlightenment, and Uisang says, bye-bye, brother, goodbye. Here I go, and another one of dancing and goodbye. And a kind of artistic one of Wonhyo with the skull and getting a halo around his head while Uisang sleeps. Look, he's sitting on a lotus flower already. And the Buddha, here's a very realistic one about a tomb or whatever. Uisang sleep. Here, Wonhyo with kind of spiritual thinking with the skull as Uisang looks. This is a very older one, older drawing from an old manuscript of this saying goodbye. This is when Uisang comes back from China and they meet together again. Now Uisang is enlightened, Wonhyo is enlightened, and they're back to being brothers. This is the Osa story, which I will get to later, and such, and them as an old friend couple together and such. Okay, let's go back here. Okay. Okay. So Wonhyo's enlightened. He says these things are recorded in the Samguk-yusa, our greatest source of early such stories and information. The thing that it's all in the mind, a cave and a grave are not two. That's a nice poetic way of putting it. Perception of the world on the condition of my own mind. Yes, the basic. There are no dharmas outside of the mind. Why should I seek them anywhere else? The dharma is the same in Shilla as it is in China. I will not go to the Tan, etc. These things. Now, this thing of, everything is created in our mind and is to the judgment of our mind, it's easy for us to learn that. It's easy to study that and get it intellectually understanding. But enlightenment is when you get it down deep, when that realization really changes the whole way that you think and you see the world. That's what happened to Wonhyo. He'd been studying Buddhism already 15 years or more, and he understood all these doctrines, but this very simple basic point, the base of it, he really got it down deep, and that's enlightenment. Okay, he studied the Nirvana Sutra, supposedly from Master Boduk, who is the top Buddhist monk of Goguryeo Kingdom, but escaped from Goguryeo Kingdom 10 years before it collapsed because the king had become degenerate and corrupt, and the king adopted Chinese Taoism, and Master Boduk protested, Your Majesty, Buddhism is much better, do not adopt Taoism, but the king ignored him, so he left Goguryeo as like a refugee exile and came to the Baekje Kingdom area south of Gyeongsan, and apparently Wonhyo was able to study with him there at the Shinwonsa Temple of Gyeongsan, one of our great places. Okay, and now the unification happened, the wars, and there's no record of Wonhyo doing anything during the war. Whatever, the great nearly 10 years of war with Baekje and Goguryeo, and with China involved, Tang Dynasty, China invading. Wonhyo just spent his time in temples, as far as we know, writing his stuff. Nothing to do with the war, but certainly then benefited by the affair. Now, we think, I've estimated somewhere around 655, his famous affair. And this is the fun thing about Wonhyo. This is great. He had a sex scandal. We love this. And when I teach my students this at the university, this is the one thing they remember on their exam. The one thing that every student is able to answer correctly. Is a memorable, Princess Yosok, nice girl. At this point, okay, Wonhyo here is just about 40 years old, nearly, and he's been a celibate monk for 20 years and such, but one day he feels desire. He feels a desire. He wants to do it, just naturally. And he feels it, and Wonhyo is the kind of guy who always goes along with his feeling and such. So he went to Gyeongju City, and he's going around traveling, making a song, singing a song, as if like a drunken vagabond, singing a song about an axe head, not an axe handle, the axe handle that's looking for an axe head that will fit it, looking for a good fit of an axe head. And in his song, he mentions the princess, the daughter of the king, which is utterly outrageous, yes, and the royal guard. Then as people around the town are talking about this, and they start singing the song, start singing the same song. Other people, it's a catchy little song, and people start singing it around town. And then the royal guard goes to the king and says, Your Majesty, somebody's singing a dirty sexual song about your daughter around town, the princess. And the king says, oh my God, who is this? Tells the captain of the guard, he said, go out and find who's doing this, who started this, drag him in here, cut off his head. No, he cannot dare to do so. And the captain of the guard comes back next day and says, Your Majesty, it's Wonhyo, the living Buddha of the Shilla kingdom. And the king is like just sitting there saying, well, what the hell do I do now? What do I do with this? But he checks with his daughter. Now, his daughter is a widow. A widow, actually. She was, young girl, like everybody else these days. She's married at 12 or 15 years old, 12 or 13 or something. She's married. She married to a captain of the military, a captain of the army, but he goes out a year or two later. He's fighting against Baekje. He gets killed. So she's a widow, and by this point, she's like 17, and she's a widow. She got no husband. So you got to think maybe she wants something too. You wouldn't object, and I don't know, if you get a call, and it's like on Tinder or something, at Tinder, somebody wants you, and hey, it's Buddha. Buddha wants to do it with you. Maybe you're going to say yes. So apparently she was quite willing. So something was set up, arrangement made, and at this bridge, this is very famous now, this bridge, this is a model, it has now been fully rebuilt in Gyeongju City. They rebuilt it just for this story. This bridge goes from Namsan, the sacred South Mountain, across the South Stream into the palace area, the Wolsung Palace area, and they've rebuilt it. It now looks like this. I was just there. I walked across this bridge like 3 weeks ago. It's just finished and it's lovely. Wonhyo's walking across the bridge and he leans over the railing. He's looking at the view on the river and he falls off accidentally. Ha ha ha. He falls off and he's in the river and in the stream here, and the servants of the palace rush out, the servants, and, oh, Master Wonhyo, and they pull him out of the stream, and they say, oh, your clothing is all wet, your robes are all wet, what can we do? And then some servants say, well, there's the quarters of Princess Yosok. Princess Yasa, her building's right there. And Master Wonhyo, you can go change your clothing in there. You can get dry clothes and change your clothes there and such. And Wonhyo goes in to change his clothes, and he doesn't come out until the next morning. Yep. And the place where this happened, supposedly, is now named Yasok-gung after Princess Yasok. Yasok-gung, which palace, Yasok Palace, which is owned by the Chae family, the Gyeongju Chae family, one of the great families of Korea. And it's one of the most fancy, luxurious VIP restaurant there in Gyeongju, really 5-star. I've been there several times when, like, the government were bringing foreign ambassadors or foreign, VIP visitors to ministers and such to Gyeongju. We eat here and such for the very best, and it's all from this story and such. Now, after his one-night affair with Princess Yasok, he came up someplace to cool off, to recover somehow from this incident, and we don't know really exactly where, but these ice valleys, 2 different kind of cold ice valleys of Cheongwon-san, Ulimgol is possible. They have a legend there about this also. Uisang-gung, Bingsan, Gegok Valley, where Chechiwan was also known to spend the summer. Very cold wind coming out of caves there, a cold breeze, they say, went there. Or Dongdaecheon, Soyosan, Jajaeam, that's north of Seoul here, right on the number 1 subway line at the very end. Gets up to Soyosan, and way up there, near, getting close to the DMZ, right where the U.S. Army used to be at Dongdaecheon base. There has the strongest thing, but there's 5 or 6 other temples around the Seoul area that try to claim that this is the place where Wonhyo came after he was boinking the princess. 5 or 6 other temples included. I was just at one on Saturday. Wonhyo of Dobong-san claims that, and others on the other side of the Samgaksan mountains, and etc. They claim this everywhere. But anyway, it is said that he went someplace like this, or maybe 2 or 3 places, but he built a hermitage like at Jajayam and spent 3 years meditating, 3 years of meditation to recover from that one great night that he had with the princess. Okay, now she had a son. She got pregnant from this one great night. Koreans like to say something like, oh, they got married and they were happy. No, there was no marriage, Jesus. It was one night stand, just like Hongdae Ipgu, sort of a thing. But they had a baby, and as Sol Chung, a baby boy, and he became the Shila's greatest Confucian scholar, the first really great Confucianist of the Shilla era, and the greatest in Shilla until Go-un Chechiwan. The 2 of them are the only great Confucianists of Shilla, and they're both here in Seoul in the Royal Confucian Shrine, the Sungyungwan Munmyo. These are the first 2 people. Sol Chung is the first person enshrined. As there are 18 Korean sages, 18 greatest Korean Confucians in that shrine, and Sol Chung is the first one. Chechiwan's the second one. They're the only 2 from Shilla. And it's Wonhyo's son. So a real congruence there between Buddhism to Confucianism, real development. This is Sol Chung. Supposedly, he created a kind of Idu writing to help Koreans understand Chinese characters better, to make it easier, simpler to understand the reading and writing of Chinese characters. Idu writing. He was a great scholar. Unfortunately, we don't have his surviving works much. These are other images of Sol Chung, the way he was. It's a little repetitive, isn't it? And the tomb of Sol Chung, supposedly his tomb in Gyeongju. Okay, and that's information about him. Okay, and somewhere around 660. Now, after this affair with the princess, somewhere 5 years later, they're breaking the brush while writing a commentary on the Hwaomgyung, the Hua-Yen Sutra, the Flower Garland Sutra, which was a specialty of his friend Uisang. Well, in a commentary, he supposedly kind of broke his writing brush and said, not going to write anymore. He needed more freedom and more wandering. He started just walking around the nation. He had a big pair of trousers, big pants, on the back of which with paint he wrote "no obstacle" in Chinese characters. I mean, there's no obstacle to the Buddhist truth. There's no barrier. Anybody can get it. He started wandering around spreading Pure Land Buddhism. You know Pure Land? Pure Land Buddhism, it's really simple Buddhism. Simple, simple, simple. That even common people can do, people with no education. And he was going to villages where farmers had no education, zero education. He would go to the village and they'd be having like a village festival, village festival time like at Danoje or something. And he would drink with the farmers and dance with the farmers for their festival and do the Sanchinje with the farmers to get their confidence, to make them trust him. They usually didn't trust aristocrats and highly educated people, but to get them to trust him. And then the next day, he would teach them Buddhism, teach them a simple Buddhism, Buddhism that the common people could use. Pure Land is very simple. All you do, you just chant Namu Amita Bul, Namu Amita Bul, Namu Amita Bul, Nam. You just chant that on and again, which means I take refuge in the Amita Buddha. Very simple. And then when you die, you can go to Buddhist heaven. You get a ticket to Buddhist heaven automatically, and then you can really learn Buddhism. It's very simple Buddhism, and it's okay for the uneducated people. He was spreading this. For this reason, Koreans kind of love Wonhyo. There's a love there with the idea, even radical leftist communist students, even North Korea kind of people and such, I've always found they have some respect for Wonhyo because as an aristocrat, high-class person, he reached out to the low-class people, the lowest, the peasants, the farmers. He tried to help them, give them hope, give them some good Buddhism. The other people in the high-class Shilla aristocracy did not care anything about the low farmers, but Wonhyo had a heart for them, a heart of compassion. And so, again, he's a beloved figure to do this. Now, somewhere here by the 680s, near the end of his life, returning to monasticism and becomes famous, by this point, famous scholar and lecturer, writing things, writing great essays about Buddhism for the unification of Buddhism. Already there are many different schools of Buddhism, some of them having come from India, and then the new Chinese Buddhist teachings that were pretty different. Wonhyo wrote essays trying to show how really it's all the same. It's the same truth, the same dharma, the same enlightenment comes at the end. Wonhyo wrote things like this that we still study today. Still, Buddhist students in the university still read Wonhyo's essays in various translations, and such books are still being published about his philosophy. His writings were recopied and sent to China, sent to Japan, and very influential. For the next 1,000 years, Chinese Buddhists and Japanese Buddhists read Wonhyo's essays and said, oh, this is genius, this is excellent. Right here on the right hand painting, that's a painting from Japan. In a major Japanese temple, they had a painting of him that they bowed in front of as a great Buddhist genius. So see, he was everything. He was the kind of loose and free monk who could dance with the farmers and teach the farmers Pure Land, and he could have an affair with the princess, and he was a genius scholar, an absolute nerd who wrote everlasting works. The one thing, he wrote more than 80 works, 22 are extant somehow in some part. We only have, it's really too bad. Maybe someday in a tomb we'll find some of the other ones, but much was lost. and such, and they've been translated all over the place. And he did all of these different kind of doctrines, covered them all, and tried to show that it's really the same truth in all of them. Now, Uisang, we're going to get to next, brought the Huaonzhong, the Avatamsaka Sutra, Huayan Buddhism in Chinese, and in English, the Flower Garland Sutra. This particular, he studied this in China for 7 years, got fully enlightened in this, and brought it back to his friend Wonhyo. He taught it to Wonhyo, and Wonhyo and him talked about it, and together raised their understanding of this very profound philosophy. And this Hwaon Buddhism is still an important part of Korean Buddhism today. At Donggukdae right here, they study that philosophy that Uisang brought over, and Uisang's writings about it, and later people's writings. It's still a big part of Korean Buddhist thinking, and he and Wonhyo amplified it together. This is the two of them talking, discussing philosophy after Uisang got back. Extensive research. This is a quote from Professor Mueller. The OSA story is funny. They're looking at fish in there, and there's 2 dead fish, and they both chant Buddhist magical chants, mystical chants, to try to wake up, to try to bring to life again the dead fish, one of them for each fish. And then the fish all look the same, of course, fish all look the same. But one of them came back to life, and it was swimming around, and they both started saying, "Hey, that's my fish. No, that's my fish. I'm the one." And just laughing uproariously, having fun as a joke. And this is a whole temple. Osa is there in Gyeongju, is based on this story, and it's a popular temple today. Just an idea of just these 2 enlightened Buddhas having fun together. This is what it looks like today. They dammed up that stream that the fish were in. They dammed it up, and now it's a little lake. And supposedly somebody said that's Wonhyo's hat remaining in the museum. It's probably not Wonhyo's bamboo hat, but who knows. Philosophy, we don't have time really, but the teachings of Wonhyo, very famous as a scholar. And again, he is enshrined here at this. This is again the temple of his birthplace, where he was born, regarded as just one of the best and greatest. He founded his own school of Buddhism, supposedly, the Bubsangjong, or also called the Haedongjong, or simply the Korean school, unique Korean thing. But he didn't build an organization. That's what Uisang did. Uisang was an organization man, his brother. He had strict discipline. He had ranks of disciples. He had written organization of teaching and such. Uisang had 10 major disciples. He found or built 10 major temples for them to teach in, 10 disciples who were fully enlightened, and Uisang's organization lasted for 1,000 years. Wonhyo was a free-spirited hippie, walking around from place to places, doing whatever he wants to do, including the princess, and just having a good time. And he didn't really leave any organization. He may have had some disciples, we don't even know their names. He didn't build any organization that continued historically and such. Wonhyo was just one of a kind. Uisang built the organization. You understand? Not organized, no disciples or successors, however, very influential to all Northeast Asian Buddhism. 66 temples say that they were founded by Wonhyo. Not much evidence there for many of them, but they love to say that Wonhyo. They're all remarkably rather small temples. The temples that Uisang founded or upgraded are some of the greatest temples of Korean Buddhism today, and of Master Jajang, some of these like Tongdosa, some of our greatest temples. Wonhyo, like the biggest temple is Cheonryangsa of Cheonryangsan Mountain in Gyeongsangbuk-do, north of Andong, a medium-sized temple, not great. That's the biggest one that Wonhyo supposedly started or founded. he did little places. Many of them are just little places up in the mountains where he supposedly stayed or meditated. Shiluksa. Supposedly, Wonhyo started this temple. There's some evidence for that right on the banks of the Han River, close to Seoul here in Yeoju City, Gyeonggi-do. A great temple, a wonderful place, right on the banks of the river, which is kind of unique. And Cheonggyeongsa, as I said, this might be the biggest one today that he founded and such in the provincial park. A very lovely, beautiful place. And Boryam, oh my God. Boryam's kind of small, but very important. This is one of our principal places of Doryang. Doryang for Kwanseum Bosal, for the Bodhisattva of compassion, the Doryang. Wonhyo supposedly started this. It is 600 meter Hebal, 600 meters high, above the ocean, looking out at the ocean. A dramatic cliff, one of the most beautiful, astounding places in Korea. One of the greatest. This is a temple I think should be world famous, and yet it's not that well known. It's way down the south coast, Namhae Island, but everybody should go here. It's just incredible. See the sunrise from here, or see the moon rise, the moon and shining on this temple and its artworks. It's an incredible place. See my website for more about that temple as such. Now, we're getting near the end here, got a little bit more time, and just to review a bit more about, I want to say this, the Wonhyo Pilgrimage Trail, this committee of no good slackers met in Gyeongju, foreigners and Koreans, professors, monks, whatever, to design a trail for Wonhyo to remember him for his journey with Uisang from Gyeongju City to Dangjin, going from the east of Korea over to the west coast. We designed a walking trail, and we tried to get the government to make it into a tourism trail like the Dulegil or some other walking trails in Korea. They never did. They thought it was a good idea, but never did it. We met here at Bunwangsa, which is one of the temples associated with Wonhyo, built by Queen Sundok, this great big pagoda. And Wonhyo was known to study here. And at the end of his life, when he died, his son Solchung used his ashes to make a statue of him out of his own ashes and installed it at this temple. That statue does not anymore exist, but this great painting of Wonhyo does exist. This is why Wonhyo has no tomb. You would think, there should be like a reliquary, a stupa, Budo stupa for Wonhyo, the greatest. There isn't any. Nobody knows what happened to his ashes. His son made a statue out of it. It was at this temple, but somehow in the civil wars afterwards disappeared. Anyway, we met here, we designed this. Click on here to see about this, and they made a video of this, the trail, walking the trail and such, and of our idea. I hope someday it becomes a real pilgrimage trail in Korea. Now let's go to Uisang and his Hae-in-do, just to finish up about him. He went to China, and there's a dramatic story of his girlfriend who became a dragon, but that's, we don't have time for that, but it's a great story. But he went to China, and he studied with the greatest master in China at that time, Master Yin-Yang, who again, of Chinese Buddhism, School of Chinese Buddhism, this new flower garland sect. He was at that time the number one master in China. And Uisang became his disciple and became the number 2 disciple. Of course, the number 1 disciple was a Chinese boy. I mean, that had to be. There weren't going to let a foreigner get that position. But a brilliant Chinese boy was number 1, and Uisang was number 2. He was that brilliant, and the two of them, the number 1 boy and Uisang, became close friends also. They became Doban, and the rest of their life after Uisang came back to Korea, they wrote letters to each other. They wrote letters back and forth talking about Hua-Om philosophy at the same time as Uisang was discussing it with Wonhyo. So it was really three great brains together doing this, the number one disciple. But that's Master Jian there with kind of the thinking cosmic cloud coming out of his head, and Uisang. Now, the story is he studied for 7 years, and he seemed to get it. He understood the Huam philosophy. He passed his exam. He's ready for graduation. Had to do a graduation thesis. It's just this kind of Buddhism. It's just like getting a degree in the university today. It's like getting your PhD degree. You got to write a thesis at the end, PhD thesis. So he writes his thesis in 10 volumes, 10 scrolls. 10 scrolls of writing his understanding of this kind of Buddhism, the Huam Buddhism, flower garland. And Master Jiang looks through it, reads through it, and he says, nah, you haven't got it. Not really got it. You're too much words, too many words, too much talking. You're beating around the bush. This is how Chinese Buddhism is really different from Indian Buddhism. In India, the more words, the better. The longer the book, the better the book. The more words, the more talking, the more speaking by the master, then he's a greatest master. Lots of speaking. In China, just the opposite. China coming to Korea, the less words, the better. It's just a very different culture. You get down to, next time I'll talk about Dosan Guksa, where he was teaching Zen Buddhism, one word. He would just say one word to his disciples. And then his disciples, I got it. Awakening, whatever, or even the teaching of no words. We'll discuss this next time. No words at all at time, but the less words, the better. So Jiang's telling him, too many words, 10 scrolls. So Uisang goes back to his room, spends 1 week meditating and trying to get it, and then writes one scroll, one book, one volume, one scroll of essay, condensing it down to the truth of Huam Buddhism, and he gives it to Jian, and Master Jian reads it again, and he still says, nah, you haven't got the core of it, the essence, the core, too many words. And Uisang is very frustrated, like PhD students get, like Kamala gets real frustrated, and he takes a scroll away from Jian, and he throws it in the fire. Says, there's nothing I can do. It's over, I give up. He throws it in a fire, and then they watch it burn, the scroll burn, but then they notice it's not all burned. There's a few pieces of paper in that fire that don't burn. This is strange. So Master Jian, he takes a stick, and he takes those pieces of paper out of the fire, gathers them together. They're just random pieces from his work that have Chinese characters on them. There's 212 Chinese characters. 212 exactly. He hands this to Uisang and says, use this. Use these words only. Make your essay. And Uisang goes back to his room and he meditates about it and stares at those 212 Chinese characters, and then he arranges them in a diagram. A diagram, makes a poem diagram, a poetry thing that goes in a swastika shape. See what he's drawing there? Swastika shape. That's 212 Chinese characters in there, and that's what he uses. He draws this diagram. He actually drew the diagram in his room, not with Jian watching. Then he brings it back to Jian and shows him this diagram, and Jian says, you got it. You got it. You understand. You are enlightened. Sorry. Yes. Oh, yes, I'm on a webpage. I'm not on the PowerPoint. This is what it looks like. This is the 212 characters in this diagram, in this shape. This shape is now made at Yin-Sa Temple, which is named after this diagram. It's called the Yin-Do. Right here, Yin-Do. That's why Yin-Sa, Ocean Seal Temple, one of our greatest temples here in Korea, has this name, and they made a walking path in the upper courtyard in this shape, so you can walk in this design and chant the the text while you're doing that, or just meditate and say the explanation is right here of the whole thing if you wish. This diagram. Here it is again. This is on a tea towel that I bought. They sell this tea towel at Wonhyo Temple. Here, or this is another recounting of it. These 212. It's very difficult to translate. This book was written, and then I did a book here at Dongguk University, published this book. I was the proofreader of it. If you want to see this Ilsung Bobge Do Wontonggi, that's the actual name of this that we call the Heindo and such. Stop that. Okay, this Master Gungyo's commentary on this. There's a hardcover book. It's $50 and such if you really want to get scholastic and academic about this. But that's the great accomplishment of Master Uisang. That diagram, the Heindo, remains a key part of Korean Buddhism, reproduced on many artworks, and still right here at Dongguk University and other Buddhist colleges of Korea that the monks study. They still study that diagram, kind of memorize it and such, and chant it and understanding. It's considered the key core understanding of this kind of Buddhism, and it traveled to China and got well known in China at the Huayan temples. They also posted artworks of this diagram. Now, as I said, Uisang was the organization man. He built an empire of Buddhist teaching, which Wonhyo did not at all. And here, the listing, this is on my website, of the Hwaom Shipchal, the 10 great Hwaom temples. Uisang had Uisang had 100 disciples, but he selected 10 of them who got the best enlightenment, the top understanding, and he put them in 10 great temples, including Bulguksa, the great temple that was built later after Uisang was already dead. One of his top disciples was the master there, teaching Hwaom Buddhism at Bulguksa and other great temples. And this is still known as a set today. It's a little controversial as to which temples it is. What are the names of them? You can read this here. This is, in my judgment, what my research that I've come up with, this is the best guess of 10 of them. I haven't got links on all of them, but here, Tohamsan Bulguksa, definitely. Bamosa, the greatest temple of Busan, Gyeongsan Gapsa, great temple there, and Jirisan Waomsa, one of the top temples of Korea, Gayasan, Heinsa, Taebeksan, Busoksa. This is maybe the first temple that Uisang started, and one of his greatest accomplishments. I don't have time to even go in on this. Click on that link to see Busoksa. And if you haven't visited there, you must visit. It's one of Korea's very greatest temples to see this. And notice, as I said, Wonhyo only founded these small temples, kind of small to medium size around Korea. But these are some of the greatest temples in all of Korea attributed to Uisang. Okay, and then here on my website, I would like to point out in closing, we have a good listing of here, the top 21 temples of Korea. If you want to know where to go, the best 21, and even the top 6. I have gone through great pains in making this list, debated it with friends of mine who are into this stuff, the top 6 temples of all of Korea that you must visit. The great kind of combination of tourism value and beautiful settings that you can make great photos, and religious importance, really important temple of Korean Buddhism. The top 6, the top 21, and then the great 108. Also, 108, is a very holy number in Buddhism, Baekpal, and 108 temples. This is designated now by the Jogye order, and I listed them here and made my own critique. I criticized their list and made, if you get into this. The top 108, there's a map by the Jogye order and the listing, and then I made my own listing at the end because I disagree with some of these choices, my own opinion, blah, blah, blah. Go into this if you wish. But that gives you the sense of what are the greatest temples, and just note that among the top 21, maybe 6 of those are temples founded by Master Uisang. So he was really important in making Korean Buddhism established as really Korean Buddhism, the way it is, really important. And he's very highly respected by the Buddhist public, highly respected. But Wonhyo is loved. Loved. We love him. The public loves him. And together they're a great example of Doban. Very different kinds of people. Uisang's very strict, always followed the rules, made his disciples follow the rules. Wonhyo just does whatever he wants to do, wandering freely. But they loved each other, they understood each other, their enlightenment was equal. A great Doban. Thank you very much for listening.